Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a topic that honestly hits close to home for so many people. Athletic injuries, we've all seen them, maybe felt them, or know someone who has. They seem like an inevitable part of pushing our bodies, right? But what we're focusing on today is a particularly alarming trend in one specific sport. I'm talking about the, skyrocketing rates of pitching injuries in baseball, especially those dreaded UCL tears that lead to Tommy John surgery. And it's not just the pros anymore. We're seeing this pop up in adolescent athletes, kids really, at an unprecedented rate. This isn't just bad luck. It feels like something more complex is going on, rooted in how our bodies handle, immense repetitive stress. Okay, so let's try and unpack this. Our mission today in this deep dive is to explore how our body's connective tissues, your tendons and ligaments, how they adapt to stress, what causes them to fail, and really crucially, what strategies, nutrition, training we can actually use to make them more resilient. Specifically thinking about that vulnerable ulnar collateral ligament, the UCL. Can we actually train the UCL to reduce that injury risk?
That's the core question, yeah. And for this, we've pulled together a really compelling stack of research. It's pretty cutting-edge stuff. It spans nutrition, biomechanics, human adaptation studies. We've got data from elite athletes right down to youth baseball pitchers. What's particularly striking, I think, is how these fields that seem pretty separate, nutrition over here, biomechanics over there, how they actually converge. They give us a much more complete picture of injury prevention that goes way beyond just, don't throw too hard.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this trend, maybe let's first dig into the biomechanics. What is actually happening in that elbow when a pitcher throws a fastball? We know injuries happen, sure, muscle injuries are common, like over 40%, but tendons and ligaments, especially in explosive sports like baseball, they're under constant threat. The mechanics are just incredibly demanding during the throw, right? Particularly as the arm goes from that late cocking phase into early acceleration. The medial elbow, the inside part, experiences this immense valgus stress. It's not a gentle strain, it's a powerful twisting force. And that can lead to microtrauma, tiny bits of damage that add up, and then eventually maybe a full-blown tear in that medial ulnar collateral ligament, the UCL. No wonder we hear about it so often.
Exactly. And if we connect that mechanism to the bigger picture, this isn't just a pro athlete's problem anymore, not by a long shot. Studies show a really clear and honestly concerning trend. The rate of UCL reconstructions, Tommy John surgery in adolescent pitchers has increased over the last decade. It's hitting young players, high school, even junior high. And these young arms are already showing significant anatomical changes. We have dynamic ultrasound studies showing UCL thickness and also ulnohumeral joint space widening. That widening is a sign of laxity, the ligament getting looser progressing just after one season of pitching in college athletes. And maybe even more strikingly, that UCL thickening, which could be an adaptation, seems to start as early as high school.
That's a really critical point. So when we see this thickening in younger athletes, how do the studies figure out if it's a good thing, like the ligament getting stronger, adapting beneficially, or if it's actually an early warning sign, a red flag for an injury down the road? Yeah. What does the research lean towards?
That's a great question. And it's tricky. It's quite nuanced. The research suggests it really could be both. It depends on the individual, the specific loads they're under. For instance, some thickening might absolutely indicate a protective response. The tissue is adapting to the mechanical stress, kind of like how muscles get bigger with training, hypertrophy. But excessive thickening or really rapid thickening, especially if it comes with other symptoms like that laxity we mentioned, or pain, that could definitely be an early sign of tissue overload. Breakdown starting is a complex signal. Clinicians are still, working to fully interpret it in context.
Okay, that clarifies the mechanics and the adaptation puzzle a bit. But beyond just how these injuries happen, who's most vulnerable? What do the studies tell us about the actual risk factors? What predicts these UCL injuries? Well, looking at MLB pitchers, research has pinpointed several factors that predict needing Tommy John surgery. Things like having fewer days off between games, throwing fewer types of pitches, a smaller repertoire, a less horizontal release point. Also, smaller physical stature, but greater average pitch speed, and maybe, obviously, higher average pitch counts per game. It's a fascinating mix, isn't it? Mechanics, workload, even body type.
It is a real mix. And while those factors are key for the pros, for the adolescent pitchers, the single biggest risk factor that jumps out from the research is pitching with arm fatigue. And this is the really tough part. It's incredibly difficult to measure fatigue objectively. And kids, especially, often hide it. Fear of missing playing time, letting down the team, the coach. The research is pretty emphatic here, quoting one study. Future efforts in assessment and mitigation of pitching with arm fatigue among this population may help to reduce the risk of arm injuries. It really feels like a call to action, doesn't it? For coaches, parents, everyone involved in youth baseball to prioritize actually listening to the body, recognizing those fatigue signs.
It absolutely does, listening to your body. But even then, how do we help athletes objectively recognize that fatigue when they're pushing limits? It's hard. And here's where it gets a bit counterintuitive, like you hinted at. We usually think high loads, high stress, it's bad, right? But some studies actually suggest that greater medial elbow torque measured in the preseason was linked to reduced elbow laxity, less looseness at the end of the season. That almost sounds like the right kind of stress, maybe at the right time, could actually be protective.
You've hit on a really key concept there. It points towards what we call load adaptation. If the tissues are conditioned properly, introduced to stress gradually and appropriately, they can respond positively. They get stronger. And this brings us to some things that might be protective factors. We see, for instance, that increased age and athletic experience often help. Older players tend to develop more consistent, more efficient pitching mechanics, which can reduce that unnecessary stress. Also, increased body weight and maybe even elbow circumference could offer some protection, possibly by enhancing dynamic stabilization around the elbow, spreading the load better. And interestingly, maybe longer arms. Increased arm length might offer mechanical advantage, allowing pitchers to generate velocity with slightly lower stress on the medial elbow.
So definitely not a single smoking gun. It's this really complex interplay, isn't it? Mechanics, volume, intensity, rest, and then just your individual physical makeup. Understanding all those pieces seems key for prevention, but also for targeting rehab if an injury does happen. Right, but let's shift from just the risks. There's real hope in understanding how incredibly resilient our bodies can be. This next part, on connective tissue adaptability, it's genuinely fascinating for both prevention and recovery. Tendons, ligaments, they aren't just passive ropes holding bones together. They're dynamic, living tissues. They respond significantly to mechanical load. Get this. Studies have shown that collagen synthesis, that's the process of building and repairing these tissues, can actually double within just 24 hours after the right kind of exercise. That's a powerful, almost immediate response.
It really is incredible, and we have some fantastic real-world examples of this adaptation. Think about elite sport climbers. Some of these folks have been climbing for 15 years or more. A study looked at their fingers, specifically the A2 and A4 pulleys, tiny structures that hold tendons close to the bone and their palmar plates. These tissues were significantly thicker. We're talking 63% to an astonishing 86% thicker compared to non-climbers. And the forces on those little pulleys can be 3 to 4 times the force felt at the fingertip. So this is a crystal clear example of hypertrophy tissue growth responding directly to chronic high mechanical stress. And another really cool example comes from animal studies, a rat ACL study. It showed that even endurance-type exercise, just treadmill running for 8 weeks, actually strengthened the rat anterior cruciate ligaments. It increased their strength, their stiffness. The ligaments became, as the study put it, less elastic and more resistant to deformation. And what's key here, the most consistent improvements were in the groups doing high-frequency but low-duration runs. It strongly suggests that consistency of loading, that regular stimulus, is vital for adaptation.
Those examples are amazing. Rock climbers' fingers getting that much thicker. Rat ACLs getting stronger from running. So if these tissues can adapt so dramatically to specific, consistent loads, can we apply this? Can we actually deliberately train a ligament like the UCL to be more resilient, to lower that injury risk? It seems like the logical next step, but I imagine there's a catch, especially when it comes to healing tissue that's already injured.
There is. There's a significant challenge with healing, particularly in tendons and ligaments. When they're injured, the repair tissue often looks more like immature tissue. The collagen fibers are disorganized, kind of messy. And this scar tissue, because it's inherently less stiff, less organized than the healthy native tissue around it, it can become what's called stress-shielded. Basically, the stronger, stiffer, healthy tissue takes all the load during movement or exercise. The weaker scar tissue doesn't get the necessary tensile signals, the pulling forces. It needs to mature properly and align its fibers, so it stays weak, less functional. It's a bit of a vicious cycle, leaving the repair undertrained and potentially vulnerable to re-injury.
That stress shielding idea really clarifies the problem, doesn't it? The scar tissue just doesn't get the workout it needs to get strong. And that brings us perfectly to the role of nutrition. Because beyond just building muscle, our connective tissues have their own unique fuel requirements. Of course, general health is the foundation, right? Avoiding chronic low energy availability, not eating enough, basically, and making sure there are no major dietary deficiencies, especially things like protein, vitamin C, vitamin D, copper, maybe omega-3s, calcium. Those are the basic building blocks.
Absolutely foundational. And when we zoom in on collagen synthesis itself, the key process for healthy connective tissue-specific cofactors are absolutely essential. Vitamin C is a huge one. Non-negotiable, really. It's a cofactor for an enzyme called prolyl hydroxylase, which is critical for collagen cross-linking. That cross-linking gives collagen its strength and structure. Humans need about 46 milligrams a day just for normal function. And you mentioned the history, the classic link to scurvy, sailors recovering with citrus fruits. It just hammers home how fundamental vitamin C is for tissue integrity. Copper is another important player. It's a cofactor for a different enzyme, lysyl oxidase, also involved in that cross-linking process. Now, the benefit here seems to be mostly when you go from being deficient to sufficient. There isn't really evidence that loading up on extra copper beyond what you need provides additional benefit for collagen.
Okay, so get enough vitamin C, make sure copper levels are okay. Those are crucial basics. But what about the things we hear more about lately? The rising stars, maybe? Gelatin and hydrolyzed collagen. What does this mean practically for someone wanting to protect their UCL or maybe recover faster from a tendon issue?
It means we potentially have some very powerful targeted tools. These supplements, gelatin and hydrolyzed collagen, are super rich in the specific amino acids that collagen itself is made of. Think glycine, proline, hydroxylase, hydroxyproline. Why? Well, because they're literally derived from animal collagen.
Yeah.
So you're providing the direct building blocks. And the evidence is building. We have studies showing, for instance, that 10 grams of hydrolyzed collagen daily can decrease knee pain in athletes and maybe even increase cartilage thickness over time. More directly related to building new collagen, one key study found that consuming 15 grams of gelatin actually doubled the rate of collagen synthesis in the subject's blood markers. Okay, and here's where it gets really exciting, linking nutrition directly to performance and tissue properties. A recent study looked at healthy male athletes. They combined 20 grams of hydrolyzed collagen with 50 milligrams of vitamin C. Remember, vitamin C is essential taken daily, about 60 minutes before they did targeted strength training. They did this for just 3 weeks. The results? Significant improvements in their rate of force development, basically how quickly they could generate force in squats and counter movement jumps. And notably, their lower limb stiffness improved. The working theory, the hypothesis, is that this timed intake boosted collagen synthesis, creating a stiffer, denser extracellular matrix in tendons. Stiffer tendons can transmit force faster, potentially leading to more explosive power.
Wow, okay. That is a potential game changer. So the key isn't just what you take collagen plus vitamin C, but maybe when you take it. Pairing it specifically an hour before your training session seems to act like a targeted delivery system, potentially accelerating that connective tissue strengthening. That feels like a really practical, actionable insight for anyone serious about building resilience, whether it's for pitching or any demanding activity. Of course, you always have to add the caveat, right? The food first principle. Ideally, get these nutrients from a balanced diet. Supplementation should be strategic, maybe under guidance.
Right. So with our tissues potentially primed nutritionally, let's move to the training itself. Specific methods designed to build that connective tissue strength and reduce injury risk. What kind of targeted strategies are showing the most promise in the research?
Okay, a key method, especially when dealing with injury repair or managing tendinopathy, the chronic tendon pain, is isometric loading. Isometric contractions, basically holding a position under tension without movement, are already a common treatment for tendinopathy. They often provide pretty immediate pain reduction, which is great. But the mechanism might be deeper. They seem to leverage something called stress relaxation. When you hold a tendon under a static load, like in a long isometric hold, the force within the tendon actually decreases over time. It's thought that water gets squeezed out and the collagen fibers slide past each other a tiny bit. Now, why is this relaxation useful? Because it might allow some of that load, that tensile force, to finally pass through an injured, weaker, scarred region of the tendon, the area that was being stress shielded before. It gives that scar tissue the mechanical stimulus it needs to remodel. And the research suggests you don't need incredibly long holds. A 30-second isometric hold seems to be enough to get about 60% of the maximum stress relaxation effect. Even more compelling, there's new research, this time in a rodent model looking at patellar tendon injury. It suggests that isometric loading specifically on that injured area actually increase markers of tendon regeneration, things like scleraxis and type I collagen, the good stuff you want for healthy tissue. This was in contrast to dynamic loading, like repetitive movements, which in the same study seemed to increase markers associated more with scar tissue, like fibrocartilage. It really points to isometrics providing a specific beneficial molecular signal for proper repair.
That distinction is fascinating. Isometric holds signaling for regeneration, while dynamic loading might promote more scar-like tissue in that specific injury context. That could really reshape rehab protocols down the line. So is it mainly about isometrics for boosting resilience and repair, or are other types of loading beneficial too?
Oh, definitely not just isometrics for overall resilience. Beyond that, plyometric training, explosive jumping, bounding exercises has shown really remarkable effects on tendon health. Studies have shown that, say, 14 weeks of plyometrics can significantly increase Achilles tendon stiffness, which sounds bad, but in this context, stiffness means it's better at storing and returning energy. And indeed, plyos improved jump performance. They also decrease the tendon's dissipation coefficient, which basically means less energy is wasted as heat during movement. The tendon becomes a more efficient spring. And then for those dealing with more chronic degenerative tendon issues, tendinosis and tense-eccentric exercise programs focusing on the lengthening phase of muscle contraction have also consistently shown benefits over the years.
Okay, so we're looking at a whole toolkit, really. From static holds like isometrics to explosive plyometrics to controlled eccentrics, a spectrum of loading strategies that can be applied carefully.
Precisely. The key word, as always, particularly around injury or potential injury, is controlled loading. Exercise is absolutely vital for connective tissue health, no doubt. But too much, too soon, especially after an injury or when dealing with high chronic loads like pitching, can obviously be detrimental, set things back. The goal is to provide just the right mechanical signals to stimulate those positive adaptations, stronger, stiffer, more resilient tissue without overwhelming it or causing further damage. It's a delicate balance, absolutely, but one we're definitely getting better at understanding.
And that brings us towards the end of another deep dive. What an incredible journey, really, into the science of resilience, especially focusing on that pitcher's elbow. So to bring it all together, reducing these pitching injuries, those UCL tears, and just enhancing connective tissue health overall, it really requires a multifaceted approach, doesn't it? It's about deeply understanding the biomechanics, like we discussed, meticulously managing load, volume, intensity, and making sure there's adequate rest. It's about making smart nutritional choices to actively support collagen synthesis, maybe that strategic timing of collagen or gelatin with vitamin C, and then employing those targeted training strategies, controlled isometric holds, maybe power building plyometrics, appropriate centrics. It's clearly not just one thing, but all of these pieces working together synergistically.
Exactly. It really drives home that consistency and precision matter. And maybe this raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider. Given this incredible adaptability of our connective tissues, how they respond so specifically to mechanical stress, and given these emerging precise nutritional strategies, what small, consistent changes could you maybe make in your own routine, whether you're an elite pitcher, a weekend softball player, or just someone trying to stay active and keep your joints healthy? What could you do to build resilience in your body? There's always something more to learn, something to apply to build a stronger, more resilient self.
That's a fantastic thought to leave everyone with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into connective tissue health and trying to tackle those pitching injuries. We really hope you feel a little more informed, maybe a bit empowered, and perhaps even inspired to think differently about how you fuel and train your own body. Until next time on the deep dive, stay curious and keep learning.